They called him the Wolf, a man no one dared to love, until a waitress with nothing to lose made his daughter smile. She didn't know that one small act of kindness would pull her into the heart of the mafia, where bullets, betrayal, and forbidden love would change her life forever. Before we dive into today's story, tell me, where are you watching from right now? And if you're new here, welcome to our family. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join us for more emotional stories like this one. The chandeliers above the Harbor City Grand Hotel glimmered like captured stars, spilling gold across marble floors polished enough to mirror the faces of the city's wealthiest. The air shimmered with champagne laughter, polite applause, and the clink of crystal glasses, a world far removed from the quiet heart of the woman carrying a tray of canapes through the crowd. Claire Monroe had learned how to disappear in plain sight. Her steps were soft, her smile polite, her eyes downcast, a shadow among glitter. Yet as she drifted between tables draped in silk and ego, she couldn't ignore the tug of something small and fragile at the far end of the ballroom. There, half hidden behind an ice sculpture, sat a little girl in a white dress too expensive for her sadness. Her shoes were new, her curls perfect, but her eyes, those large, lonely eyes, seemed older than the night itself. Claire paused, the world around her blurring into a swirl of laughter and arrogance. The girl couldn't have been more than 6, but she sat alone, her tiny fingers tracing patterns on the tablecloth like someone trying to draw a friend she didn't have. Guests whispered her name as they passed. Isabella Moretti. The name carried weight, fear, the kind of name that made even the boldest men lower their voices. Claire didn't know much about the Moretti family, only that Damien the Wolf Moretti ruled this city's shadows, and that no one dared to even glance too long at what belonged to him. But seeing that small girl alone at a table, invisible in a room built to be seen, stirred something inside her, something fierce, something human. She placed her tray down quietly and knelt beside the child, careful not to startle her. "Hey," Claire whispered softly, her voice barely rising above the music. "Don't you want to dance? The floor's waiting for you." Isabella looked up, surprised that anyone had spoken to her at all. "Nobody wants to dance with me," she said, her voice delicate, almost breaking. "Daddy says they're just scared." Claire's heart twisted. She extended her hand, ignoring the murmur that rippled through the tables nearby. "Well, I'm not scared," she said, smiling gently. "Come on, princess. Let's show them what they're missing." The orchestra's melody swelled, rich and tender, as Claire led Isabella onto the floor. The girl's laughter, soft and free, was like light cutting through the cold grandeur of the room. For a moment, the gala froze, every guest turning to watch. Some looked scandalized, others curious, but no one dared intervene. The Moretti heiress, the untouchable, was dancing with a waitress. Claire didn't care about the stares. She twirled Isabella gently, holding her small hands, watching joy blossom across her face like sunrise. For the first time that night, the child wasn't a mafia boss's daughter. She was just a little girl who wanted to be seen. Then, slowly, the air changed. Conversations stopped mid-word. Music notes hung in the air like fragile glass. Claire felt the shift before she saw it, the sudden hush, the tension crawling up her spine. She turned her head, her heart quickening as she followed the silence back to its source. Across the ballroom, at the center table beneath a crown of light, sat him, Damien Moretti. He was everything the rumors promised: tall, sculpted, terrifyingly calm. A black suit tailored to power, a silver watch glinting like a blade. His blue-gray eyes, cold as a winter storm, watched her with unreadable stillness. Around him, men in suits stiffened, sensing the shift in their boss's attention. Claire felt her throat tighten. She had never seen him before, not this close, and now she wished she never had. Because looking into those eyes felt like standing too close to fire. It burned, fican, fascinated, and warned all at once. Damien's expression didn't flicker. He said nothing, but the air between them, across the marble, across the silence, became electric, dangerous, alive. Claire's hands trembled, though she kept smiling for Isabella's sake. The child giggled, unaware of the storm gathering behind her. The orchestra hesitated, faltered, and then, as if the world itself bowed to him, the music stopped. The glittering hall fell into perfect stillness. Waiters froze mid-step. The laughter died. Claire could hear her heartbeat echoing against the silence, could feel every eye turned toward her, the foolish waitress who dared touch the wolf's daughter. Isabella turned to her father, her innocent smile fading. "Daddy?" she called softly, her voice trembling now. Claire's stomach dropped. Damien's chair scraped back against the marble, the sound sharp and final. Slowly he rose, deliberate, regal, terrifyingly composed. Every movement carried authority, danger, control. His men parted instinctively as he began walking toward them, each step measured, echoing through the hall like a countdown. Claire couldn't move. Her pulse raced, her knees weakened, yet she stood her ground, her hand still gently wrapped around Isabella's. The crowd held its breath. Some whispered prayers. Others simply watched, hungry for the scene that was about to unfold. Claire swallowed hard, her mind spinning with fear and confusion. She hadn't meant to challenge anyone, least of all him. But as Damien's gaze locked onto hers, she realized she had done something no one else dared to do. She had stepped into the wolf's shadow and refused to flinch. The room seemed to vanish around them. Damien stopped just a few feet away, his icy stare fixed on Claire. The tension coiled so tight the chandeliers seemed to hum. And then, with a voice low, smooth, and dangerous, he said, "Who told you? You could touch my daughter." The lights flickered once, the girl gasped, and Claire realized she might have just danced her way into the most dangerous man's world. The ballroom seemed to breathe with silence the moment Damien Moretti rose. The soft clink of crystal halted. The violin stuttered mid-note, and every head turned toward the man whose name carried more fear than any siren in Harbor City. His tailored black suit cut through the glittering crowd like a shadow that owned the light. Claire felt her pulse climb into her throat. The tray in her hand trembled, glasses chiming like nervous bells. Around her, servers melted into corners. Guests pretended to adjust their gowns, no one daring to meet his eyes. But his gaze was fixed, cold, precise, on her. He moved closer, each step deliberate, the sound of polished shoes against marble echoing like judgment. Claire's mind raced with disaster. She'd crossed an invisible line, touched his daughter, stepped into a world that didn't forgive mistakes. Yet when he stopped before her, towering but composed, the danger in his face softened just enough to let a fragment of humanity break through. "You made my daughter smile," he said, voice low, foreign accented, more command than gratitude. The words hung between them like a fragile truce. Claire couldn't speak, she only nodded, throat tight, heart pounding. Damien studied her for a moment longer, then turned away, resting one gloved hand on Isabella's small shoulder, as if sealing the moment with his approval. The crowd exhaled as though released from a spell. Hours later, the gala lights dimmed to embers. Claire clocked out, exhausted, the night air cool against her skin. Harbor City's skyline glittered beyond the hotel's stone steps, indifferent to the people who served beneath it. She pulled her coat tighter, ready to walk to the bus stop, when a sleek black limo glided to the curb like a predator emerging from fog. Two men in dark suits stepped out, identical in build, faces carved from stone. "Miss Monroe?" the taller one asked. She froze halfway down, in the steps. "Mr. Moretti would like a word." The way he said it wasn't a request, it was gravity. Claire's instincts screamed to run, but curiosity, danger's most loyal accomplice, held her still. She nodded carefully, and the shorter guard opened the rear door. Warm air and expensive colognes spilled out, along with the faint hum of classical music. She hesitated, thinking of Lily asleep at home, of rent due, of how one act of kindness had shifted the axis of her world. Then she stepped inside. The door shut with a soft thud that felt final. Plush leather, tinted windows, silence. The city outside blurred into streaks of light as the limo eased forward. Claire sat upright, hands clasped tight in her lap, pulse drumming. Neither guard spoke. The air seemed heavy with unspoken rules, with the scent of power and danger. She could see her reflection in the glass, pale, uncertain, but trying to be brave. Her mind replayed the look in Damien's eyes at the gala. Not anger, not approval, something in between, something unreadable. Every second inside the car stretched thin with questions she dared not voice. Where were they taking her? What did he want? Gratitude? Warning? Punishment? The hum of the engine deepened as the limo turned away from the main road, headlights sweeping across the dark waterfront. A sleek yacht flickered briefly through the window, then disappeared behind warehouses. She caught the driver's eyes in the mirror, flat, emotionless, watching her like a specimen. Claire's fingers fidgeted with the thin chain of her necklace, the one keepsake from her mother. She whispered a silent prayer, though she wasn't sure to whom. The city lights faded entirely now, replaced by the pulse of distant waves. A soft click echoed, one she recognized too well from 100 suspense films, but had never heard in real life. The sound of a lock engaging, her breath hitched, the reflection in the tinted glass trembling back at her. The guards didn't move. Their silence said everything. Claire's reflection quivered in the dark window as the final lock slid into place. The car accelerated toward the docks, and a voice from the unseen partition murmured, calm and lethal, "Miss Monroe, the wolf would like to ask why you touched his daughter." The limousine slid through the sleeping streets like a bullet wrapped in silk, and Claire felt every heartbeat as the city lights dissolved behind tinted glass. The driver spoke into a hidden mic, a low, wordless murmur that made the guards straighten, and then the car eased to a halt beneath a tower of glass that stabbed the clouds. The Wolf's penthouse. A doorman in black nodded them through without question, and Claire followed the guards into an elevator lined with mirrors that threw her pale face back at her from every side. She caught herself trying to smooth her hair, absurdly aware of how small she looked in her thrift store coat. The elevator doors whispered open onto another world, an expanse of marble and city light, every surface glowing gold and steel. The air smelled of expensive whiskey and danger. Damien Moretti stood at the far window, the skyline glittering behind him like a crown he owned. He didn't turn at once. He simply said, "Sit." The word landed with the weight of an order used to obedience. Claire obeyed, sinking into a leather chair that probably cost more than her year's rent. His voice came again, smooth, precise. "Why did you touch my daughter?" She swallowed, fingers twisting together. "Because she looked alone." The honesty escaped before she could polish it into caution. Damien turned then, eyes sharp enough to cut silence. "Alone?" he repeated, almost amused. "My daughter is never alone." But the flicker of uncertainty that crossed his expression betrayed the lie. He studied her face as if trying to read what kind of woman would defy fear for a child not her own. Claire felt the tension tighten the room's air. His every movement was control. Even pouring himself a Dr. Ink looked like a calculated threat. "People fear me," he said finally. "You didn't." "I was terrified," she admitted softly. "I just cared more about her." That answer disarmed him in a way bullets couldn't. For the first time, something human passed through his gaze, a glint of respect, of curiosity. He gestured toward a long dining table set for two, crystal gleaming beneath candlelight. "Eat," he said. "You haven't since the gala." Her stomach betrayed her with a growl, and she took the offered seat. The food was delicate, unfamiliar, but her hands shook too much to taste it. Damien sat opposite, watching, the predator at rest yet still aware of every heartbeat in the room. "You work two jobs," he said, not asking but stating. "You live in Old Harbor." She froze. How did he? "I make it my business to know who enters my world," he finished. She met his eyes, forcing herself not to flinch. "Then you already know I don't belong in yours." He leaned back, the faintest smile touching his lips. "Perhaps that's why you interest me." The words hung between them, dangerous and magnetic. Outside, thunder rolled across the bay, echoing like distant gunfire. She saw in him not just power, but fatigue, A man armored in violence, yet bound by love for a daughter he didn't know how to reach. "You think I'm a monster," he said quietly. "Everyone does." "Monsters don't care," she whispered. "You do." For a heartbeat, the room forgot to breathe. A door clicked, and tiny footsteps pattered across marble. Isabella appeared in her nightgown, clutching a stuffed rabbit, eyes bright with relief. "Miss Claire!" she squealed, running past her father's guards straight into Claire's arms. Claire knelt, hugging the girl tight, feeling the tremor of pure trust. Damien's expression faltered. Power meant nothing in that instant. His jaw tightened, a storm behind restraint. "Isabella, it's late," he said, but the command lacked teeth. The little girl looked up at him, then back at Claire. "She smells like cookies," she announced. The tension cracked. Even Damien's mouth curved almost onto a smile. He dismissed the guards with a glance, and for a moment the penthouse was quiet, except for rain starting against the glass. Claire helped Isabella back toward her room, feeling his gaze on her the entire time, heavy, unreadable, dangerous. When she returned, Damien stood by the piano, hands clasped behind his back. "She has not smiled like that in months," he said. "You did that." His voice had softened, but the weight of it still pressed against her chest. "I didn't mean to cross any line," she murmured. "You crossed one the moment you looked at me without fear." The words struck deeper than threat. They felt like confession. The clock chimed midnight. She rose, needing to escape before kindness turned into something she couldn't name. "Thank you for the meal, Mr. Moretti." He nodded once, the faintest ghost of warmth flickering through the ice. "Go home, Claire, and keep your phone close." She hesitated, unsure if it was a warning or protection. The elevator carried her down through floors of silent wealth until the lobby swallowed her again. Outside, rain drenched the pavement, city lights swimming on the wet asphalt. She pulled her coat tight, breath fogging, heart pounding with confusion, fear laced with something else, a dangerous curiosity about the man upstairs. She stepped into the street, the limo waiting again under the dripping awning. The driver opened the door. She climbed in, watching droplets race down the window like tiny, frantic hearts. For a fleeting second, she thought she saw movement on a nearby rooftop, a glint, a spark, then dismissed it as lightning. The city hummed its sleepless tune. She exhaled, whispering to herself, "It's over." The next instant shattered the thought. Gunfire erupted in a blistering chorus outside the building. The windshield spiderwebbed, guards shouted into radios, and Claire ducked as glass rained around her. Through the chaos, she heard the driver yell, "They're hitting the wolf!" And somewhere above, the penthouse lights went black. Gunfire shattered the night like thunder tearing through glass. Screams and the echo of boots filled the air as Damien pushed Claire down behind a marble pillar. His arm braced protectively over her trembling body, while shards of crystal rained from the shattered chandelier above. The world spun in chaos, smoke, gunshots, the roar of engines outside, and yet Claire could hear nothing but the pounding of her own heart against the marble floor. Damien's men moved like shadows, firing in precise bursts, their faces unreadable, their loyalty carved in silence. "Stay down," Damien growled, his voice low and dangerous, but laced with something softer, something almost human. When one bullet cut through the edge of the wall, Damien twisted, pulling her into his chest, and a muffled groan escaped him. Claire looked down in horror, a crimson bloom spreading across his sleeve. "You're hit!" she gasped, her hands shaking. "It's nothing," he bit out through gritted teeth, firing back before dragging her toward the panic room hidden behind a steel door in the hallway. The air smelled of gunpowder and fear. Her white blouse was streaked with dust, her breath coming in short, frightened gasps. Inside the safe room, silence pressed heavy, broken only by Damien's shallow breathing. He sank into a leather chair, blood dripping between his fingers. "Let me help you," she said, moving closer. He tried to stop her, but her eyes, wide, steady, filled with something that disarmed him, made him pause. Claire tore a strip from her own sleeve, pressing it against the wound. His body tensed at her touch, every muscle drawn taut, but he didn't pull away. "You shouldn't be here," he murmured, voice low, dark, raw. I shouldn't be alive, she whispered back. Their eyes met, his stormy, hers luminous with unspoken terror and compassion, and for a heartbeat, the world outside ceased to exist. The bandage soaked with his blood, her hands trembling, their breaths mingled in the charged silence. Why would they attack you? She asked softly. Damien's jaw clenched. Because power always comes with enemies. He leaned his head back, closing his eyes, pain and exhaustion carving new lines across his face. Claire's gaze lingered on him, the man everyone feared, now bleeding under her hands. You saved me, she said, voice trembling. You got caught in my war, he replied, eyes snapping open, blazing with something fierce. And I don't lose what's mine. Her breath hitched. Something about the way he said it, possessive, protective, made her pulse race in confusion. Outside, sirens wailed faintly, but neither moved. Claire dipped the cloth in water, dabbing gently at his wound. You're burning up, she whispered. Damien caught her wrist, his touch firm but not cruel. Why are you helping me? She blinked, startled. Because you would have died for me. His gaze softened, and for a fleeting moment the wolf looked almost mortal. He reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her face with his uninjured hand, his thumb grazing her cheek in a gesture that sent shivers racing down her spine. You're different, he said quietly. You don't look away. Her lips parted, unsure whether to thank him or run. He smirked faintly, though pain glimmered behind it. Everyone looks away from blood. She swallowed hard, feeling her throat tighten. Maybe because they're afraid of what they'll see. The words hung in the air, fragile and dangerous. Damien chuckled low, the sound like gravel. You think you see me, Claire? She hesitated. I see a man trying to remember how to breathe. He froze, eyes locked on hers, and for a moment, just a moment, his mask cracked. Then he leaned forward, so close she could feel the heat radiating off him. Careful, he murmured, his voice a velvet warning. You don't know what you're saying. Claire's heart raced. She wanted to pee, away, but something in his gaze rooted her in place. His breath brushed her skin, and she could smell the faint trace of smoke and whiskey. The tension between them pulsed like a live wire, dangerous, magnetic, irresistible. You're bleeding again, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He smirked. So are you. And only then did she notice a shallow cut across her arm, blood streaking her pale skin. Without thinking, he took her wrist, lifted it to his lips, and pressed his thumb gently over the wound. You saved my daughter, he said, voice low. That means something in my world. She shivered, not from fear, but from the strange tenderness beneath the menace. And now? She asked. Now, he said, holding her gaze. You're part of it. Silence swallowed them both. The storm outside had died, replaced by an eerie calm. The walls seemed to hum with unspoken truth, two souls from opposite worlds bound by a moment of blood and fate. Claire's mind screamed to leave, to run before he decided she was a threat. But her heart, fragile, foolish, ached to stay. He leaned back, letting out a breath, wincing as the pain returned. She reached to adjust the bandage, her fingers brushing his skin again, igniting another tremor between them. You should rest, she whispered. You should forget what you saw tonight, he countered. Her chest tightened. I can't. He studied her face for a long time, then sighed, a dark, weary sound. That's what I was afraid of. Damien's fingers wrapped around her wrist, his voice dropping to a whisper that chilled her blood. You shouldn't have seen this. Now I can't let you go. Claire woke to the scent of roses and antiseptic, sunlight filtering through tall, arched windows that framed the world like a painting. Her body felt weightless yet trapped, her mind clawing through fog until the memories hit. Gunfire, blood, Damien's arms shielding her, his voice a low growl promising safety. Now she was in a stranger's world, his world. A mansion of marble floors, glass walls, and guards who moved like shadows. Her waitress uniform had been replaced with a soft silk dress she didn't remember putting on. When she tried to leave her room, two men in black suits blocked the doorway. For your safety, Miss Monroe, one said, expressionless. Safety. The word tasted like a lie. Days blurred into each other, a strange rhythm of luxury and confinement. Claire wasn't allowed outside, but she could roam the mansion, its endless hallways, echoing silence, and the faint laughter of a child that became her only warmth. Isabella. The little girl ran to her the moment she saw her in the sunlit garden, clutching a worn teddy bear. "You came back," Isabella whispered, eyes bright with fragile trust. From that moment, Claire's resentment began to soften, like frost melting under sunlight. They painted together, read fairy tales in the library, and fed the koi fish in the marble fountain. Isabella's laughter became the only sound that reminded Claire she was still human, not a caged bird in a gilded trap. Yet the house itself seemed alive. Every wall had ears, every corner watched. Damien's men lingered at doorways, their guns hidden but their eyes sharp. And Damien himself, he was the gravity holding this place together. He appeared at unpredictable hours, sometimes in the dining room, sometimes in the garden, his presence dark and magnetic. Claire tried to ignore the way her heart stumbled when he entered a room, the subtle brush of his cologne, the low timbre of his voice, the way his gaze stripped away every pretense she tried to build. One evening, as a storm rolled over Harbor City, thunder growling like distant war drums, she found herself in the study, staring at the shelves of leather-bound books. Damien entered without sound, his black shirt rolled at the sleeves, revealing the scar from the bullet she'd helped remove. "You shouldn't be wandering alone," he said, voice low, almost a warning. Claire turned, her anger flaring despite the danger. "You can't keep me here forever," she snapped. A faint smirk ghosted across his face. "Forever? No, until I'm sure you're not a threat." "A threat?" she whispered. "To you? I'm just a waitress who danced with your daughter." His eyes darkened, something unreadable flickering there. Pain, guilt, hunger. "You saw more than you were meant to." He stepped closer, the air between them charged, heavy with things neither dared name. "And you saved my child," he added, his tone softening. "That debt isn't easy to repay." Claire's breath caught as he reached past her, his hand brushing hers when he picked up a small photo frame, him with Isabella, before the shadows had crept into his life. "She reminds me of light," he murmured, "and light doesn't belong in a world like mine." For a moment, Claire saw not the Mafia Boss, but the man beneath, the father, the broken soul clawing through his own darkness. Their eyes met, and something shifted. The storm outside cracked lightning through the windows, as if mirroring the jolt in her chest. She hated that she felt it, the pull toward danger, the fragile ache of empathy that blurred every line she'd drawn. Later that night, as Isabella slept curled in her arms, Claire realized she was no longer just surviving. She was feeling, and that terrified her more than any gun. The following morning, she caught fragments of whispered conversations between guards, words like traitor, shipment, and ambush. The world outside was closing in on Damien, and somehow she was inside the crossfire again. When he appeared at breakfast, his face was hard, jaw tense, phone in hand. "Change of plans," he told his men. "No one leaves the grounds." Then his gaze landed on her, sharp as glass. "Especially her." The table went silent. Claire's pulse quickened, her fork trembling in her hand. "What's happening?" she asked quietly. Damien didn't answer. He dismissed the others and waited until they were alone. "Do you trust me?" he asked, his voice almost tender. "I don't even know you," she said, though her voice faltered. "Red." He leaned closer, shadows tracing the edge of his face. "You know enough." Later, unable to sleep, she wandered into the garden. The night air was cool, stars veiled behind restless clouds. Damien was already there, leaning against a stone pillar, cigarette glowing between his fingers. "You're not supposed to be out here," he murmured. "Neither are you," she replied. A faint smirk tugged at his lips. "Touché." He watched her quietly for a moment, then said, "You don't understand the danger you're in, Claire. My enemies don't stop at walls." "Then let me go," she said. "Let me take Isabella somewhere safe." His eyes hardened instantly. "She's my daughter. No one takes her anywhere." The raw possessiveness in his tone both frightened and stirred something deep inside her. "You can't control everything," she said softly. "I've learned that's the only way to survive," he replied. The storm that had started as tension between them was now wildfire. When she turned to leave, his hand caught her wrist, firm, warm, almost pleading. "Stay," he said, the single word rough, human. The way he looked at her then was dangerous, like a man starved of sunlight and sanity both. And though she knew she should pull away, she didn't. For a breath, they stood beneath the flickering garden lights, two worlds colliding, both bleeding from invisible wounds. His thumb brushed her pulse, and her breath hitched. "Damien," she whispered, unsure if it was a warning or a prayer. His lips curved slightly. "Careful, Claire, the wolf bites." He let go, leaving her skin burning where he'd touched. That night she lay awake, questions devouring her. Who was the real Damien Moretti? The monster the city feared, or the father who carried his daughter's drawings in his pocket? The answer frightened her, because she was beginning to see both. As she finally drifted to sleep, the distant echo of his vow. Ice replayed in her mind, low, dangerous, almost intimate. "You shouldn't have seen this. Now I can't let you go." And when dawn came, it brought no peace. Passing the study, Claire froze. Damien's voice, cold and clipped, on the phone. She leaned against the wall, heart pounding as his words sliced through the silence. "If she betrays me." He paused. The air seemed to stop moving. "End her." Claire's blood ran cold as the call disconnected. Behind her, the floor creaked, and when she turned, Damien stood in the doorway, his unreadable eyes locked on hers. Rain hammered against the tall glass of the Moretti mansion, each drop like a heartbeat echoing through the halls as Claire stood frozen near the window, the echo of Damien's words. "If she betrays me, end her," still slicing through her mind. The night outside pulsed with blue lightning, painting the marble floors in cold light, and she could almost feel the city trembling under the weight of his name. When she turned, the world inside the mansion had changed. Guards whispered in urgent tones, and a single call from Damien's lieutenant sent ripples of dread through the staff. The wolf's empire was bleeding again. Somewhere in the distance, gunfire crackled like firecrackers swallowed by thunder. Claire clutched the hem of her shirt, torn between running and understanding the storm that lived inside the man upstairs. When Damien appeared at the top of the staircase, his black shirt was unbuttoned, his knuckles bruised, his expression unreadable. She wanted to hate him. She wanted to ask why every shadow in this house obeyed him like a god. But then Isabella's small voice pierced the silence. "Papa!" And the girl ran across the marble floor, wrapping herself around him with complete trust. Damien's shoulders sagged. The wolf looked almost human. Claire felt something twist deep in her chest, a dangerous sympathy she didn't want. She had seen men like him in stories, never up close. Men who broke the world to protect what little light they had left. When his eyes lifted to hers, there was no mask, only exhaustion and but a flicker of something raw. "It's over for tonight," he murmured, but the tremor in his voice betrayed the lie. Hours later, after the mansion quieted, Claire found herself in the library where the scent of smoke and rain still lingered. She pressed her palms to the table to stop them shaking. The door creaked open. Damien stepped in, his arm bandaged, a streak of crimson staining his cuff. "You shouldn't be awake," he said, voice low. "Neither should you," she whispered back. For a moment the storm outside became their rhythm, lightning flashing, thunder answering, both of them caught in a silence that spoke too much. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey, pushed one toward her, and sat across the room, elbows on his knees, gaze lost in the fire. "Power is a curse I can't escape," he said at last, not looking at her. "Every move I make costs someone something." Claire swallowed hard. She could see the weight of the world behind his eyes. "Then why keep carrying it?" she asked softly. His jaw clenched, the muscles in his cheek twitching as though he was fighting an answer. "Because if I stop, everything I love dies." The honesty in his voice startled her more than his violence ever could. He looked at her then, truly looked, and the air thickened. The wolf's stare was no longer a threat, it was a confession. Her pulse quickened. She didn't know if it was fear or something far more dangerous pulling her closer. The fireplace hissed as rain leaked through the chimney, sparks snapping into the air, and she realized she was holding her breath. He rose, slow and deliberate, and came toward her, every step echoing through her bones. "You're not afraid of me," he said. "You should be." She met his gaze, shaking her head. "I'm afraid of what's happening to me," she whispered. For a heartbeat, neither moved. The storm raged, the fire glowed. Their shadows met somewhere between Gui, Eld and Desire, two broken pieces orbiting a danger neither could name. And then, just as his hand reached toward hers, the night shattered, a deafening crash of glass from the hallway, a scream, and the sound of splintering wood. A masked intruder burst through Isabella's window, lightning flashing on the blade in his hand as he lunged straight for the child. The room exploded in chaos. The crash of glass, the hiss of wind, Isabella's terrified screams splitting the night. Claire didn't think. Instinct moved her faster than fear. She threw herself over the little girl just as the masked intruder lunged forward, the knife gleaming in the flash of lightning. Time froze for a single heartbeat, the metallic glint, the smell of rain, the thundering of her own pulse, and then gunfire shattered the moment. Damien's voice roared through the storm, low and deadly, as he slammed the man against the wall, his fury more terrifying than the thunder outside. Blood sprayed across the white marble, painting the floor in horror. Claire could barely breathe as she held Isabella close, trembling, her body shielding the child while her eyes met Damien's across the room. His shirt was torn, his face cut, his gun trembling slightly in his hand, but it wasn't fear in his eyes. It was something deeper, something raw. He crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbed her shoulders, and shook her, not out of anger, but desperation. "You could have died for her," he rasped, his voice breaking through the storm's howl. Claire's tears fell freely, her lips trembling as she whispered, "So could you." The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. Damien's breath shuddered. He stared at her like a man seeing sunlight after years of darkness. Slowly, he reached for her hand, his fingers cold and stained with blood, and pressed his lips against it, soft, trembling, forbidden. For a man known for power and violence, that single gesture held more fragility than words ever could. Claire's heart raced painfully, caught between fear and something she dared not name. Outside, the thunder rolled again, shaking the mansion, while Isabella sobbed quietly in Claire's arms, unaware that something unspoken had just shifted between her protector and the man she feared. When the danger was finally cleared and guards dragged the lifeless intruder away, Damien remained by the shattered window, his shoulders heavy beneath the weight of 1,000 unspoken battles. Rain soaked his hair, tracing down the scars on his jaw, and for a moment he looked like a ghost, haunted, beautiful, untouchable. Claire wanted to speak, to thank him, to scold him for taking a life so easily, but her voice betrayed her. Instead, she gently tucked Isabella into bed, humming softly until the child's breathing evened out. When she turned back, Damien was still there, staring at the storm, lost in thoughts that seemed to tear him apart from within. She approached quietly, her bare feet silent against the marble. "You can't protect her from everything," she said softly. His reply was a whisper, more to himself than to her. "I can try." Then, after a long pause, he added, "Power is a curse I can't escape, but tonight it nearly cost me you." The words struck her harder than the wind. She looked up at him, her heart pounding in the quiet room. "Damien," she breathed, but before she could finish, he turned, brushing a damp lock of hair from her cheek with rough tenderness. The air between them was electric, charged with fear, guilt, and desire neither of them dared acknowledge. Hours passed in uneasy silence. Claire sat by Isabella's bed, watching the child sleep peacefully, unaware that her father had just killed to keep her safe. Somewhere deep inside, Claire's heart twisted with pity, for Damien's isolation, for his sins, and for her own growing attachment to the man who had destroyed her life yet saved her tonight. Every glance, every word they'd shared in the past days came rushing back. His anger, his confessions, his rare moments of warmth. And now, the way his lips had trembled against her hand. She couldn't tell where fear ended and compassion began. Outside, dawn crept in, bleeding pale gold. Through rain-streaked windows, exhaustion finally pulled her down, and she drifted to sleep beside Isabella, her head resting against the mattress, her mind tangled with confusion and guilt. But when the morning light grew stronger, Claire stirred, her hand reaching instinctively for the warmth she expected. The faint sound of Damien's steps, the soft murmur of guards changing shifts. Instead, there was silence. A silence too deep, too wrong. She sat up, her chest tightening as she looked around. The curtains fluttered gently. The storm had passed. Everything seemed calm, until she noticed the crimson smear trailing across the floor, from the shattered window to the doorway. Her breath caught. "Damien?" she whispered, standing on trembling legs. The house, once filled with guards and life, felt empty, eerily still. The scent of blood hung in the air like an omen. Her pulse quickened as she followed the marks, her bare feet brushing against the cold marble. The path stopped halfway down the hall, where his phone lay shattered beside a single black glove. Her vision blurred with panic, her heart slamming in her chest as the truth clawed at her mind. Something had happened, something terrible. Claire clutched the blood-stained glove to her chest, whispering his name into the echoing silence. Damien. But only the sound of distant thunder answered back. The mansion felt like a tomb without Damien. The scent of his cologne still lingered in the hallways, sharp and haunting, but the silence screamed louder than any ghost. Claire's heart thudded painfully as she stared at the blood smears on the marble floor, her reflection fractured in the crimson streaks. Fear clawed at her throat, but something stronger burned in her chest. A raw, desperate instinct that refused to sit still. When the phone rang, her trembling hands picked it up before she even thought. On the other end, Apien's voice, raspy, cruel, spat out words that froze her blood. "Tell the wolf we've got his little girl." Then laughter, cold and echoing before the line went dead. Claire's knees buckled. Isabella. Taken. The world blurred, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. But then her eyes landed on the tiny paper star sitting on the nightstand. One Isabella had been folding earlier that day. Her fingers shook as she unfolded it, revealing numbers scribbled in childish handwriting. 14, 6, 17. Something about them tugged at her memory. It wasn't random. Isabella had once told her she liked hiding messages for her father, secret codes. Claire pressed the paper against her heart and whispered, "Hold on, sweetheart. I'm coming." Outside, the city was on fire. Sirens wailed in the distance, orange light flickered against shattered glass, and the heavy sky wept rain that smelled of smoke and metal. Harbor City had become a battlefield, the streets crawling with men loyal to either Damien or Luca Serrano. News reports called it a gang war. To Claire, it was hell. She borrowed one of Damien's black coats, too large for her frame, and slipped into the storm. Each step splashed through puddles streaked with oil and blood, her breath fogging in the cold night air. She tried not to think of Damien, of the way he had looked at her last, eyes torn between love and war, but his voice still echoed in her head. "You shouldn't have seen this. Now, I can't let you go." Maybe he hadn't meant it as a threat. Maybe he couldn't let her go because she had already claimed a part of him he never meant to give. Claire stopped at an old corner cafe, abandoned, its sign hanging loose. She remembered Isabella once mentioning the stars in the cafe window. Her pulse quickened. Inside, dust blanketed everything except the small counter where a map of the city had been pinned up, full of red circles and scribble, D notes. Her eyes darted to one circle labeled Dock 14, then to another, Warehouse 17. The numbers from the star suddenly made sense. Dock 14. Warehouse 17. The girl had left a breadcrumb trail in code. Tears blurred Claire's vision as she whispered, "You clever, brave little soul." She grabbed the map, tucked it into her coat, and ran back into the night. By the docks, the air reeked of salt, gunpowder, and fear. Fires burned in distant alleys, and the echo of gunfire rolled like thunder. Claire crouched behind an overturned truck, her shoes soaked and her hair plastered to her face by rain. Every few seconds, headlights swept across the wet concrete, revealing bodies, bullet casings, and the wreckage of Damien's war. Somewhere in this chaos, Isabella was being held. Claire pressed forward, her heart hammering so loudly it drowned out the storm. She thought of Damien, his hands shaking as he confessed that power was a curse, and now that curse was devouring him whole. She reached Warehouse 17, its massive doors rusted and chained. Her fingers trembled as she unwrapped the chain, every sound amplified by the silence around her. She heard muffled shouts inside, men arguing, a child's voice crying. Her stomach twisted. "Isabella," she breathed. But before she could push open the door, a voice behind her sliced through the night. "Going somewhere, sweetheart?" The metallic click of a gun echoed inches from her skull. Claire froze, her breath catching in her throat. The rain dripped down her face, her body stiff with terror, but her eyes flared with defiance. Slowly, she turned her head just enough to see the glint of silver and the smirk of the man holding it. The barrel of the gun pressed harder against her skin. Her heart raced, but she whispered one steady, trembling sentence. "If you hurt her, Damien Moretti will burn your world to the ground." The man chuckled darkly, cocked the gun, and said, "Sweetheart, the wolf's already dead." The metallic snap freezes her pulse, breath trembling against the dust-filled air of the warehouse, her fingers clutching the tiny paping. Her star that still carries Isabella's scent of crayons and innocence. When she turns, the muzzle of a gun gleams beneath a flickering bulb, and behind it stands Luca Serrano, smile curved like a knife. He circles her slowly, boots crunching glass, the echo of his voice curling through the darkness. "You shouldn't have come alone, sweetheart." The ropes of fear tighten around her chest, but she meets his gaze anyway, refusing to give him the satisfaction of watching her break. From outside, thunder rolls, but she knows it's not thunder, it's gunfire, distant yet drawing closer. Damien is coming. Luca's men drag her to the center of the room, bind her wrists to a rusted pipe, and he whispers near her ear, "You were always meant to be part of his downfall." The words sting like acid, but before she can ask what he means, the warehouse doors explode inward. Damien storms through the smoke like a storm dressed in black, eyes cold, jaw set, pistol raised. "Let her go, Luca." The sound of his voice cuts through chaos like steel. Even the flames from the burning crates seem to bow. Luca laughs, stepping behind Claire, pressing the barrel of his gun to her temple. "You've come a long way, Wolf, just to die with your favorite toy." Damien's men pour in, bullets screaming, the world dissolving into red flashes and shattering glass. Claire ducks as sparks rain down, her heart splitting between terror and the strange, reckless faith that Damien won't let her die. He fights like a man possessed, every move precise and lethal, and still Luca's laughter pierces the smoke. "You built your empire on a lie," he shouts. "Your throne was never yours, and the woman you trust," his finger points toward Claire, "was part of it from the beginning." For a heartbeat, Damien's eyes falter, confusion seizing his breath. Claire shakes her head violently, tears slicing down her cheeks. "He's lying, Di. Mien, I swear I didn't know anything." But the doubt, sharp and poisonous, cuts through him before reason can speak. The fight slows, the air thickens with betrayal. "What is he talking about?" Damien demands, voice rough with something that isn't just fury, it's heartbreak. "I don't know," she cries. "Please, you have to believe me." Behind them, the flames roar higher, swallowing the walls in orange light, reflecting the war inside him. Lucas seizes the moment, grabbing a fallen pistol, his grin feral. "Believe her. Don't believe her. Either way, You die for her. Time shatters. Claire sees the gun rise, hears the click, and everything inside her screams Damien's name. The shot cracks the air. Damien throws himself in front of her, and blood blooms across his chest as Claire's scream cuts through the fire. Damien's body hit the floor with a thud that split the air like thunder, the echo folding into Claire's scream as gunfire shattered the night around them. The world blurred. Smoke, screams, flickers of flame, and all she saw was him bleeding out on the cold ground, the wolf finally silent. She pressed her trembling hands against the wound, whispering his name over and over as if the force of her voice could hold him to life. "Don't you dare leave me," she cried, her tears mixing with his blood, her heartbeat pounding louder than the sirens wailing in the distance. He reached up, his hand weak but deliberate, brushing her cheek, a fleeting touch that felt like a promise and a goodbye at once. "Protect her," he whispered, his voice barely there, and Claire knew he meant Isabella. The moment she heard the shouts closing in, she dragged him behind cover, clutching him as chaos raged, praying to a heaven she no longer believed in. When Damien's men arrived, she refused to leave him until one guard pulled her away, saying the cops were coming. "Go, Claire," one shouted. "He'd want you safe." She stumbled out through broken alleys, blood on her hands and soul, carrying Isabella in her arms. That night, the mansion burned behind them, the wolf's empire collapsing into smoke. Weeks turned into whispers. Harbor City spoke of the wolf's fall, the rival gangs scattering, the king dethroned. Some said he died in that war. Others swore he vanished into the sea. Claire didn't care for legends. She only knew what she'd lost. She rebuilt her life quietly, far from the violence, far from the haunting pull of his gaze. She opened a tiny cafe by the harbor, a place of warmth and light, where the smell of cinnamon and coffee drowned out the ghosts. Yet every night when she closed the shutters, her eyes lingered on the dark water, waiting for something she couldn't name. Sometimes she still dreamed of him, of the wolf in shadows, whispering her name like a vow. Rain came endlessly that season, washing the streets, hiding tears. One evening, as thunder murmured over the docks, she turned the cafe sign to open and looked up to see a flash of movement, a small girl bursting through the door, rain dripping from her curls. "Miss Claire!" Isabella's voice trembled with laughter and memory. Claire froze, her heart stopping mid-beat before she dropped to her knees, arms open wide. The child ran into her embrace, warm and real, the past flooding back in colors too vivid to be dreams. How are you here?" Claire whispered, pulling back to look at her face. And that's when the door creaked again. Heavy footsteps crossed the floor. The world stilled. Damien stood there, alive, scarred, pale, but impossibly alive. A faint smile ghosted across his lips, softer than she'd ever seen, and the storm outside seemed to bow in silence. He looked older, worn by the weight of everything lost, yet his eyes, those steel-gray eyes, held the same fire that once terrified kings. Claire rose slowly, disbelief shaking through her body. "You're supposed to be dead," she breathed. "So were you," he murmured back, a trace of humor breaking through the gravity. Isabella giggled and ran between them, clutching a folded paper star. Damien stepped forward, placing it gently on the counter, the same kind Isabella once made for her father in the mansion, now stained faintly with soot and time. "She never stopped folding them," he said softly. "Said one day it'd lead us back to you." Claire's throat closed, her vision blurring again, not from fear this time, but from the unbearable swell of everything she'd buried. He studied her face for a long, silent moment, as if memorizing every freckle, every breath. The cafe lights flickered, thunder rolled, and somewhere outside the sea struck the pier like a heartbeat. "Why?" she asked finally, her voice trembling. "Why come back?" He leaned closer, his presence the same blend of danger and safety that had once undone her. "Because some wars aren't fought with guns," he said quietly. "They're fought with what's left of your soul." He reached for her hand, hesitant, reverent, and when his fingers brushed hers, the storm outside seemed to still. "You thought you saved me, Claire," he whispered, his voice breaking just enough to betray the man behind the myth. "But all along, You were the only reason I wanted to be saved. Claire's breath caught as he drew her hand to his heart, a heartbeat still alive, still defiant against the darkness. Outside, lightning split the sky, illuminating the paper star between them, a fragile symbol of everything broken yet somehow whole. The world exhaled, and the wolf, once feared by all, finally found peace in the arms of the only woman who ever saw the man beneath the monster fade to black.